Does a ghostly doctor sit ready to see patients on the top floor?
What negative spirits lurk in the bathtubs in the basement?
Who is Tommy, and why does his spirit linger?
Find out the answers to these questions and more as we uncover the formidable hauntings and history from the Wildwood Sanitarium in Salamanca, New York.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
And this is The Haunted Atlas, a Haunted U.S. podcast. In the interest of fully exploring history of certain locations, The Haunted Atlas may discuss sensitive or disturbing topics. Listener discretion is advised.
At first glance, it looks like a grand old home. The kind you'd expect to find tucked along a quiet New York street at the turn of the 20th century. But history rarely allows buildings to remain what they were designed to be, and as Wildwood weathered the tuberculosis pandemic of the early 1900s, it gathered a darkness that seems to still linger. I am super excited to be talking about Wildwood. This was built in 1900. And then it was in 1903 when two doctors purchased the home, hoping to use it as their practice.
Okay, so only 3 years after it was built.
Yeah. And honestly, something that I feel like I've said before on the podcast is like, it's interesting to me at that time that doctors were like purchasing homes to practice medicine in.
Right. And I guess the patient rooms were just bedrooms.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I actually ended up looking into it because I was like, when did this stop? Because like we don't do that anymore. It was basically stopped in the 1960s and 70s because doctors practicing medicine in their homes also coincided with home visits. So like doctors visiting you in your home. And it was at that time that with technological advances and the healthcare and health insurance reform that, you know, hospitals were becoming the new centers for care.
That is so interesting to me because a few things. One, growing up, I always wondered why there was these home visits on TV and in movies, and why could I not get one? But that makes sense. And two, there are a lot of research that's been done showing that recovery is better at someone's home versus at a hospital because you feel more comfortable, etc. There's a myriad of reasons. So it's interesting to me that we see this shift. I wonder if there was a higher recurrence of illness or injury, etc.
That's a really good point because, of course, like the technological advances are great, you know, and having spaces for them is great, but maybe like the recovery periods were worse.
Right, but also great for infection control because when you have a hospital to go to, that means that you wouldn't necessarily infect everyone in the home. That's
actually also true. Didn't even think about that. So Dr. John Henderson and Dr. Carol Perry were the two doctors who purchased the property, and they wanted to perform osteopathy in the home, according to Wildwood Sanitarium's website. And this is where doctors manipulate and massage the body's bones, joints, and muscles to like treat mental disorders of patients. And I read that and I was like, how do you massage a bone?
I don't know. As someone who has had a high tibial osteotomy, which is a procedure where they break and reset your tibia, for lack of a better explanation. I'm sure any orthopedics listening to this are like, that's such a basic explanation. But I went to so much physical therapy and I still don't know what this means. Like massaging your bone. I mean, you can grasp in your muscle, but the bone itself seems not massageable.
Right. But apparently it still continues to this day. So you got it done.
Well, but that's different. That's like orthopedics.
I see what you're saying.
That's not treating I got my knee. Wait. Let's clear this up. I got my knee surgery because I had repeat dislocations, not because I had a mental disorder.
Okay, wait. I forgot that was the reason. You know what, everyone? That's my bad. That's funny. Okay, so yeah. So traces of it still seem to exist today.
I'm not over you telling me I have a This is where the friendship ends. This is where you say, you know what, Sarah? It took me this long into this podcast. Picked Wildwood just so I could tell you your knee surgery also was to treat a mental disorder.
Correct. I actually wrote it in my notes. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah. So it took the doctors and 3 nurses that were helping them start the place 7 years to prepare the building for treatment. So it didn't actually open as a holistic treatment place until 1909.
And what were they doing that took 7 years? Because that's a long time, especially when you consider you would have had to pay mortgage, utilities, etc., with no income.
That's actually a fair point. Didn't even think about like utilities, bills, etc. I found like this general overview, and it kind of just said that it took them 7 years.
Mhm.
My opinion is that the house is like 3 stories high with an attic on top of that. I'm thinking, they brought in baths for the holistic healing that they put in the basement. They had to set up the room so that they were ready for patients. The doctor's office had to be set up. And I'm thinking because it's like split amongst all these floors, maybe they had to turn the home into a medical practice and kind of set up. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And also if they were practicing, perhaps doing home visits, etc., at the same time, it might not have been their only or even their primary focus.
Yeah. And, the other thing I didn't think about actually until right now is the fact that a lot of the doctor's office / residences that we talk about, they have like sections. So like one section of the house is the residence and the other section is the doctor's office. This seems like they were trying to make the whole house an entire like holistic healing space.
That's true. So that will take a significant amount of time.
Yes. Now, some focuses of theirs, because I've said holistic healing, but some focuses of theirs were light therapy, hot baths, and early electrotherapy. So we'll fast forward to the early 1920s, and this is when tuberculosis, or at that time consumption, was spreading through the nation. And of course, we're in New York, so at that time the population was growing and is kind of a hotspot for contagions. The state actually mandated that Dr. Henderson and Dr. Perry convert the entire building to TB care from holistic healing.
That's quite a change, especially if your focus is joints.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you have to do infectious disease.
I completely agree. And obviously they're named doctors. So they of course went to med school, but I was thinking it was interesting how the building also transitioned from mental health care to this like physical care.
Yeah, what are you going to do with a bunch of baths for tuberculosis patients?
Exactly, yes. And so they were basically forced to change their entire practices, and they focused on TB care for the rest of their time in this building. And it's crazy to me because when I first read that the state had mandated it, I was like, that seems really crazy to tell a doctor they have to practice a certain type of medicine. But I saw several sources that stated that apparently at the height of its spread in the 1910s, 1920s, it had killed 1 in 7 of all people that had ever lived.
Wow. I thought you were going to say 1 in 7 of people that contracted it. That is a significant amount of people. A seventh of the population?
Yeah.
That's wow.
And again, several sources that confirmed that figure. And to me, then I'm like, okay, I kind of get it, right? They probably ran out of spaces in the hospitals that were forming at that time.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Unfortunately, both Dr. Henderson and Dr. Perry passed away in 1941, and Dr. Henderson's family actually ended up taking ownership of the building. Now, Dr. Henderson's family owned it until 1946, and at this time, TB was becoming curable, and so there wasn't really a need for the building to be this specialized anymore. And then in the 1950s, the building was purchased and turned into an apartment building with 3 apartments, which lasted for about 30 years, which is a crazy turn of events.
That is very crazy, especially given that they went from having baths in the basement to it being an apartment complex.
Right. I can't imagine, right? Because I'm thinking these tenants probably needed storage space, which was probably in the basement. And I can't imagine being like, hey, I want to go get my winter clothes, and I like go downstairs and there's just a bunch of baths there.
Right.
So like I said, the apartment buildings lasted for about 30 years, and then the building fell into disrepair because it was sitting vacant for an extended period of time, which we've seen time and time again.
Right. And I think they actually mentioned that on the tour when we were there.
Yes. Now, before I get into like modern day, I thought there were a couple notable rooms that I should mention just in the layout of the house that have been associated with some of the individuals who occupied them across its older history. The first one is Tommy's room, which is named after a young boy named Tommy who was present in the house when the rooms were apartments. I think it's super cool that they kind of have it set up like a kid's room now.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cute.
I remember there being toys and stuff in there.
Yes. It was so, so cute. Another room is named after a woman named Linda, who came to the sanatorium as a patient. Now, she wasn't a TB patient. She was actually a burn victim that had come to see Dr. Henderson and Dr. Perry for help.
Okay, so this was before the TB mandate.
I think the way that this was worded, it may have been at the same time.
Okay.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she was there during this time of the tuberculosis treatment, but like wasn't there for TB.
That's wild to expose yourself, especially as a burn victim, to a communicable disease.
Yes. And then a third and final room I wanted to notate was the doctor's office on the floor below the attic. So this was where Dr. Henderson and Dr. Perry saw individual patients. And the reason I wanted to mention it is because they have like medical equipment from the time period in the room still. There's like a table in there. There's instruments along the countertops. And they're just like, it's really interesting to get to see all of this stuff that existed at that time.
I remember when we were there, I would not get up on that exam table, and you were brave enough to do it.
I know. We tried to do an ESTA session, and I got nothing. I remember that. But I remember there were like stirrups at the end of the thing, and I was like, do I want to put my feet in these?
Yeah.
Do I want to? And I think I did.
I think so. But the stirrups are an interesting addition to the room, given that it was TB patients.
See, and I'm wondering if maybe that was set up before during the holistic healing portion.
But still, stirrups?
That's true.
For joints and mental health?
Yeah, honestly, you're right. So in 2017, it was purchased by the Wagatha family, and they renamed the property back to Wildwood Sanitarium, its original purpose. They have been completing a slow but steady restoration project on the property to try to bring back some of the historical elements from the building's first purpose. And that's being funded, according to their website, by remaining open for paranormal investigations.
That's really interesting. Not only leaning into the paranormal aspect, but that being the sole funding is very interesting.
And so, completing an investigation here isn't just beneficial for you or your paranormal group. You know, it actually helps with the family's efforts and the preservation of the house, which is really cool.
I think that's amazing.
But if the building's medical chapter ended decades ago, many believe something else remained behind. The rooms where visitors say the past isn't just remembered, it's still very much present.
Sheriff, we got a lot to talk about.
Welcome to Twin Peaks. I'm your Twin Peaks veteran, Special Agent Matt Hanna.
And I'm your first-time viewer, Sheriff Hannah.
And each week, we're visiting David Lynch and Mark Frost's Twin Peaks on our new show, Welcome to Twin Peaks, a Twin Peaks rewatch podcast.
Entering the town of Twin Peaks.
We're talking dreams, damn fine coffee.
A damn fine cup of coffee.
Back we're talking mysteries.
And asking the important questions like, who really killed Laura Palmer? Are the owls what they seem? And why does this town feel like a nightmare you don't want to wake up from?
It is happening again.
Whether you're a longtime Twin Peaks resident or stepping into the Black Lodge for the very first time, Welcome to Twin Peaks is your guide through the woods.
What kind of fantastic trees have you got growing around here?
New episodes every week wherever you get podcasts.
And be sure to follow our socials at Welcome to Twin Peaks Podcast for schedules and opportunities to call and write into the show.
I'm gonna turn it upside down!
The mysteries are dense and the secrets are dark.
We'll see you in Twin Peaks with a fresh cup of coffee.
Tons of activity is reported at Wildwood Sanitarium, and it includes a wide variety of paranormal claims. From shadow figures to orbs to EVPs to people being touched or even pushed, there's a lot going on.
I believe it. With 3 floors and an attic and a basement, there's a lot there.
There is a lot there, and the history is so strong, I think, because not only did it serve as the TB facility, well, first the holistic health facility, you can have strong emotional ties there. Then TB, lots of death, strong emotional ties. An apartment complex, people living there, again, strong emotional ties. So I think it makes sense that in every different time period, there was a lot of energy surrounding the home. The Wagatha family themselves have actually reported strange happenings here. To literally quote one of the family members, I'll have balls roll across the floor, doors opening and closing, footsteps, knocking, all kinds of noise. End quote. You love knocking so much.
Oh, yeah. No, it's my favorite thing in the entire world.
They went on to say, lots of people will come and they'll make connections with a relative or one of the doctors in the house. They go away with some kind of healing message of some sort. It sounds funny, but it's like the building wants to go back to a place of healing. End quote. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of times places are haunted by spirits associated. What they're saying here is that there's actually unassociated spirits that are manifesting here.
Yeah.
A lot of times people say that water can be a good conductor for paranormal energy. And with the bats in the basement, they did have kind of an influx of water, as well as I think there was a river nearby.
Yes.
During public investigations, many people report feeling as if they're being touched. One woman specifically reported a tingle on her ankle, and when she looked, she found a scratch there. She said she felt that the spirit was trying to get her attention. And during the same investigation, one of the spirits called to a participant by name.
That would be so freaky to me, to like just have someone say Erica.
There's a lot to unpack here. Public investigations are typically packed.
Yeah.
And so that always makes me skeptical of claims like being touched, or unless you can confirm silence, anything verbal. Now, did the other people know her name and be able to say it? Doubtful. But when it comes to the scratch on her ankle, the house also sat abandoned for a while, so that could have been from the house.
I agree. That was one of the first things I thought of because the Wagatha family does a good job, I think, of filling the rooms with items from the time. And so there are pieces of furniture in a lot of different places. And I definitely think it could be possible to pass something and not realize that you've nicked it with your ankle. And then the name calling, somebody else in the public investigation could have been named the same thing. And so somebody could have been calling their name.
That's a good point, especially if they were in separate groups. It's like maybe someone else is named Erica downstairs. You hear what sounds like a spirit calling Erica.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not to say that there can never be any evidence on public investigations, but I do think you really have to be skeptical and take it with a grain of salt and look for hard evidence. We're going to move through some of the haunted spaces in the house, and we'll start at Tommy's room. That's furnished as if meant for a little boy, like you mentioned. There are toys there. A lot of times people bring toys as either offerings or attempts to engage with Tommy's spirit.
Do they leave them there? I'm hoping they leave them there. Okay, because I was going to say, it's a very nice thought to think that, when people visit, he ends up getting new toys for good. You know what I mean?
Just the idea that it could be keeping his child spirit perpetually happy every time someone comes is a very sweet thought. There are reports of shadow figures in this room and also voices being heard, disembodied voices. From what I saw, the shadow figures reported are adult-sized, not child-sized.
I was going to ask if we think that maybe Tommy's parents or the adult who was maybe looking after Tommy is kind of also watching over him in the afterlife, especially with all these strangers coming in. Like maybe that draws them to the place even more.
That's actually a great point. Like maybe he is there, but he might not be manifesting. So instead the caretaker is, which would make sense that a caretaker would be defensive in that way. I hadn't even considered that. I couldn't find credible records of what the EVPs are, or the disembodied voices rather are. It didn't seem like anything notable or that really made a ton of sense. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Clearly, people still want to engage with Tommy or Tommy's circle of people. So it makes a lot of sense that there's still energy in this room.
Sometimes child ghosts can be a little bit scary because there are reports of child ghosts kind of luring people in and it not actually being a child.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular case, I would totally understand people's comfortability with it because we know who Tommy was. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. I completely agree with that. We know that he lived there. We know that that was his space as well. So it does make sense to attribute it to that. That's not to say that it couldn't be something else.
Right.
But I think it makes sense to attribute it. Linda's room is the doll room, and the room is said to be incredibly active. In fact, they sometimes live stream the room because it's so active, so people can literally see if items are being moved on their own.
We are living in the future.
Yep.
That's crazy.
You don't even have to go there to get the hauntings. The hauntings will come right to your screen.
Just like home visits.
Oh my gosh, bring it all back. So because the room is said to be incredibly active, there's a variety of things that happen in there. EMF readers and spirit boxes tend to go off in here. Some of the dolls have actually been known to fly off the shelves, and that's why they do live stream it, because they really try to emphasize the authenticity of the hauntings and not feed into hype.
Yeah.
So they want people to be able to see it in real time, not doctored.
And what's interesting about that phrasing too is you're not saying that they fall off the shelves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because a slant or a doll just getting moved by air, and falling over could just be physically explained. But if it's like flying across the room when there's not really a draft in there, and there isn't, I mean, I believe there are windows.
Yeah, it's like 3 sides of wall, and there's some windows, and then there's that
Right.
entryway.
Yes, but I don't think there's enough of like a window, quote unquote, to the outside to let in any air to have them like fly off the shelves.
Right. I completely agree with that. While the house definitely isn't in the best shape, it's not so run down that there's air leaking into that degree. I mean, it wasn't well insulated, but they're actively working on renovations.
Yes.
So I don't think it's like significant effects of the environment, other than perhaps cold spots.
Right.
When psychics investigated here, they found that a woman named Linda inhabits it, hence it being called Linda's room. And she died in the sanitarium from severely burned legs caused by an overturned kerosene lamp, which makes sense given the history.
Yeah.
She tends to engage specifically well with REM pods, people say, which is interesting. For those that don't know what a REM pod is, essentially it's, to really dumb it down, it's a box with an antenna, and if you approach the antenna, it beeps and lights up. So it's meant to identify if there's something in the field nearby that's getting close to it.
And they're very loud. Like this is something you like set up on the top floor and go down to the bottom and leave it up there, and you'll hear it from the bottom floor.
Right. Something interesting to me about this room is, given that there are so many dolls, because we were there and there are so many dolls, a lot of them are plush. So I think it's interesting if there's any sounds here, because I guess the spirit box doesn't pick up sounds in the room, but I would think that ambient noises would be really absorbed by the dolls.
That's
if
a
that
good
makes
point.
sense.
Yes.
Like, not that we're hearing whispers and stuff all the time, but I think anything from the outside that isn't clearly spoken at conversation level, anything lower than that, I think would be really muffled by almost the soundproofing
Yeah.
of the dolls. And maybe that's why there's no claims of EVPs or anything in there.
Right. Right. I mean, you'd have to be like in the room, and even then you're right, like would that be enough? And even on the recordings, it's
Right.
like it would have to really break through the barrier.
Right. Psychics have also reported that they feel as if a woman was pushed down the stairs.
Ooh.
She is said to have died from that and then haunt the stairwells.
Linda or this woman?
This woman.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense to me. If she was pushed down the stairs, we talked about, you had said like a lot of emotion, and that would definitely be occurring with that event.
It does make me wonder what time period she's from. Was this when it was a holistic health center and they were trying to treat mental health, and maybe someone with poor mental health acted out? Or was this from when it was an apartment and it was a fight or something gone wrong? I think there's a lot to be discovered here.
Yes, and it's interesting because there aren't any descriptors either of her spirit. So we don't know what clothes she's wearing. We don't know there's nothing to indicate what time period she might be from.
Right. Another death that is believed to have occurred on site is a hanging on one of the upstairs floors. In the room where this alleged hanging occurred, apparently flies congregate on the windows. The owners have said that they spray for them and they try to treat the area, but they always seem to show up.
That is a very interesting presentation.
Yes, and I wonder if it's almost as if it's giving off the scent of a decaying body and the flies are drawn to that.
Yes, that's what I was thinking is like, how nature works like that. But that is just so interesting that it would still be there. Like that scent would still be lingering there.
Yeah, and I will say when we were there in winter. It was cold. I think most of us kept our jackets on for the whole investigation because while there aren't open windows, it is not well insulated. But I do remember I noticed that there was a lot of bugs in there. And so I wonder if this is perhaps just a product of the location and maybe they're drawn to the scent or pheromones of other flies.
Yeah.
Or if it's something paranormal. It could be either.
I agree, yeah. It's like I can't even lean one way or the other right now because I need more information, I think.
Right. I do think it's interesting, though, that they repeatedly treat the area and the flies persist.
That's true. I kind of forgot you said that. But yeah, that is, I mean, those sprays usually last pretty well.
On the top floor, there is the doctor's office and the patient rooms, as you mentioned. And it's said that there's a negative spirit that's up there, but also the spirit of the doctor. I wonder if this is one and the same. Because people have this generic negative spirit and then I'll say like character of the doctor. And I don't know that these are separate entities.
I agree with you. I could imagine that there would be some negativity from the doctor, especially from when it was forced from a holistic healing to a tuberculosis. I don't know if that, I didn't really read anything about the reactions to that. It just, they kind of had to. So I could imagine some negative feelings with that, or even like the doctor's character presents when he's like working on a patient and maybe the negative spirit manifests when somebody passes, like
could be
residual energy kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be so many things. It could be a disgruntled patient. It could be someone angry there when the apartments were there. It could be the angry person that pushed the woman down the stairs. I think there's just so much in the history and not enough information about a general negative spirit to really make a determination.
Yeah.
One of the reports from the office is stomping. And again, is this coming from the doctor? Is it coming from the negative spirit? Is it coming from something else, especially given that the owners say spirits tied to the people that are there show up? It's hard to discern what is Wildwood and what could be associated with whoever is there at a given point.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if it's like someone's like ancestor or family member that passed like running up to go see them?
Oh, you always say the positives. You're always so positive. People have also caught EVPs in the doctor's office and seen objects moving on their own.
Like I mentioned earlier, the tools and equipment there are from the time period. So they, I think, are holding on to that energy from that time. I could totally imagine whatever spirits in there kind of attaching themselves to these objects and moving them.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And when we were there, we did feel that the room was very active. We had good responses with Spirit Box as well as some of our other devices. And it just felt active. Sometimes when you're investigating, the best tool you have is your intuition. And it definitely felt active.
Yeah.
Now, the basement, in my opinion, was the creepiest part of the house. Like we said, there's still a tub down there. It's unfinished. There was a table, like some sort of medical or embalming table that was down there. It's said to house specifically negative spirits down there. In fact, they've been captured in EVPs saying that they want people out and even threatening them.
And I believe that because the basement is where the healing and the baths were prominently taking place. And so I'm assuming if spirits are down there, then they were sick. either with TB or mental disorders, and they're not going to want a bunch of people around that they don't know.
That's actually a great point. I was like, why are these people so angry? But that makes sense. Duh. It's not like it's fun to be at the hospital or treated.
Right.
There's no evidence that I could find of these spirits actually causing harm. But in most cases, people left after being prompted to by the spirits, which makes sense. And that's something that we would have done had that occurred.
Absolutely. And I don't even think that that's even just like a fear thing where you hear something and you want to leave because something's telling you to leave. It's also a thing of respect, you know, like if a spirit does not want you in a space, you shouldn't keep trying to connect with it.
Right. I completely agree. Another report down here is hearing clapping, which is an interesting behavior for a ghost in the bathhouse section of a sanitarium. And I was trying to think of what other sound this could be. Maybe it's the sound of people getting in and out of the baths, like skin connecting with water. I don't know. That feels like a stretch. But I couldn't really justify the clapping.
No, the only other thing I could think of is like walking if they didn't have shoes on.
Or if they had like flip-flops.
Yeah, true. Flip-flops. I didn't
like
even think
slapping.
about those.
That's actually a great point.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's that. So while it was, of course, the sanitarium itself, there were people that did live here, and they seemed to report a specific ghost. This is the ghost of a man that roams the hallway in chains. There's not much known about him or who he is or why he was there, but the chain aspect is really interesting to me because it wasn't a prison, but I wonder if they used to chain up patients.
Well, we did mention electrotherapy.
Yeah, but this seems like a place that you went willingly. You weren't committed.
That's true, yeah. I mean, I would hope that wasn't happening.
The only thing I can think of is a patient, or maybe even predating the sanitarium, maybe the grounds were haunted. The last thing that I want to add about the hauntings is specific to our experience there. And while we definitely had interactions throughout, I think you will agree with me when I say the most notable happened in the basement.
Yes.
And this was an SD session in which I was the one doing the SD session, I guess. And I had the noise canceling headphones on, I was blindfolded, etc. During that session, which I thought was going terribly because the words were absolutely not connected, and I was like, okay, you know, it is what it is. It turns out that it was great. So tell me your account as the person asking the questions and then hearing what I was saying.
It was one of the craziest things I've ever experienced. And I know that you and I have said this before, but it's like if I wasn't there and I just watched a video of it, I might not believe it because it was so intense. So, you know, we kind of connected with a younger child, it seemed, and it seemed as though the child wanted to play hide and seek. And so that's kind of what we were doing. You know, at one point we were kind of trying to connect with it and asking it if it needed anything, if it wanted anything. And it said discover. And then I remember us saying like, what do you want us to discover? And then you said me. So we were like, oh, do you want to play hide and seek? You know, like, is that what this is? And the cat balls were going off like, you know, it almost seemed like the child was running around the room trying to find a place to hide at this point. So it was, everything was happening in a sequential order that just made sense. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I know that before we've gotten responses, I've never ever seen something like that where it was like actual like makes sense in order responses.
Yeah.
And the craziest part of the session to me was when your dad had like complimented this young child on their hiding abilities and you said thank you. I was like, whoa.
And I think that was right at the end of the session, right? Because you guys all started making noise and I couldn't hear what anyone was saying. All I heard was all at once, everyone making a ruckus. And I thought they're saying, okay, we need to wrap it up and move on because this was the last thing we did.
Yeah.
And it was getting late. And I thought that you guys were like, okay, this sucks. And so I took off the headphones and everyone was like, no, put them back on. You know, it was wild. And watching the footage back, I honestly don't know if I would believe it if it was anyone but me that did the SD session because I know for a fact I could not hear you guys.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It was unbelievable. Hands down, my favorite paranormal experience anywhere.
Yes, agreed.
In addition to these claims and all of our experiences there, this is an incredibly well-known paranormal location. It's been featured on mainstream shows such as Ghost Finders, Paranormal Lockdown, and America's Most Terrifying Locations. In fact, on the episode of Paranormal Lockdown, one of the spirits was captured screaming, "Get out, Nick."
Whoa, screaming is a big word.
Yes. But as always, you should decide for yourself what is real and what is sensationalized. So today you can visit it for paranormal investigations. And if you've been here, we would love to hear your stories. You can email the team at hauntedus.com and include Haunted Atlas, the Wildwood Sanitarium in the subject, or find us on social media at HauntedUS. Tune in to our next episode to see where we drop the pin on our adventure across the Haunted US. This episode of Haunted Atlas was presented and researched by Sarah Sweeney and Erica Barrett, supported by research from Haunted US head writer Mitch Goth, with production assistance by David Sweeney and music by Colleen Johnson. Our executive producer is Brandon Rugsey. Haunted Atlas is a production of Haunted US. Visit hauntedus.com for more information.